Sign it today, Mom. Don't ask questions. My son, Marcus, slid the single sheet of paper across the kitchen table like he was dealing a winning hand. It was a crisp Monday morning. The smell of the bacon I'd made him, extra crispy, just how he liked it since he was 6, still hung in the air. He hadn't even taken a bite. I looked down at the document. The bold letters at the top made my stomach clench. Quitclaim deed. Marcus, I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. I kept them under the table. You want me to sign over my house to you? Our home? Your house, he corrected, his voice smooth, rehearsed. He was 28, wearing the expensive sneakers I'd seen on a credit card statement I wasn't supposed to see. It's just a formality, Ma. For asset protection. My new business venture, it's risky. I don't want this place caught up in liabilities if things go south. This way, it's safe. Safe, I repeated, the word tasting like ash. This was the house his father and I bought with our first real jobs. The house where I'd nursed his father through cancer until his last breath in the downstairs bedroom. The house where I'd raised Marcus, painting over his childhood growth marks on the doorframe with a heartache only a mother knows. Every scratch on these floors was a memory he now called a liability. He leaned forward, that charming smile, his father's smile, not quite reaching his eyes. Come on, Ma. You trust me, don't you? It's still your home. You live here forever. This is just paperwork. A technicality. I need you to do this for me. Today. The urgency was a sour note in the familiar kitchen. I thought of the last 6 months. Marcus moving back in after his latest marketing firm collapsed. The late-night phone calls where he'd whisper about getting square and handling collectors. The new, flashy friends who'd pick him up, their car stereos shaking our old windows. I'd asked. He'd always said, don't worry about it, Ma. Grown man business. And now this. Grown man business was my front door key. I am a woman who prays. But in that moment, I didn't pray for guidance. I prayed for the steel that had gotten me through burying my husband, through working 2 jobs to keep this roof secure, to seep back into my spine. I looked at my son. My beautiful, desperate boy. I saw the fear he was trying to mask with bravado. He wasn't trying to steal from me. He was trying to save himself. And he was willing to use my heart, my home, as a life raft. A technicality, I said softly, picking up the pen he'd placed beside the deed. His shoulders relaxed. He saw victory. That's all it is. Just sign right there. He pointed to the line. What Marcus didn't know, what he could never have imagined as he watched my pen hover over the line that would make him the legal owner of my soul's address, was that I had already signed. 3 weeks ago. I want to pause right here. If you're a mother, if you've ever sacrificed until it hurt, please hit that like button and subscribe. In the comments, tell me where you're listening from. I need you to understand why a mother's love sometimes has to be as hard as diamonds. Because when your child's survival is pitted against your own, you don't just make a choice. You make a plan. 3 weeks ago, on a rainy Tuesday, I had finally opened the letter from the bank I'd been avoiding. It was about a second mortgage I didn't remember taking. The signature was a decent forgery of mine. The notary stamp was real. The loan officer's name was familiar, a friend of Marcus's from high school. My blood didn't boil. It froze. This wasn't a mistake. It was a theft. A quiet, smiling theft. That same afternoon, while Marcus was out, I made 2 calls. The first was to my cousin, Valerie, a real estate attorney with a mind like a steel trap and a heart for lost causes. The second was to a man named Mr. Solomon. Mr. Solomon wasn't a lawyer. He was the stoic, elderly owner of the hardware store down on MLK Boulevard, a store my father had patronized. He was also, as my father told me on his deathbed, a quiet guardian in our community. He solved problems money couldn't touch. I'd never called in that favor. Until now. I met them both, separately, in Valerie's office. He's going to come for the house next, Val, I said, my voice hollow. He's in trouble. He'll see it as the only asset left. Valerie's eyes were grim. We can stop him. We can get a restraining order, expose the fraud. And send my son to jail? I shook my head. No. I need to protect him from himself. And I need to protect what his father left us. That's when I proposed the plan. Not to stop Marcus, but to let him think he'd won. And to place the prize he thought he was stealing into the hands of someone who would use it to save him. Mr. Solomon listened, his gnarled hand steepled. He knew Marcus. He'd seen him hanging with the wrong crowd. He'd even hired him to sweep the store once, trying to give him good work. Marcus had never shown up. You want me to be the bad guy, Mr. Solomon stated, his voice a low rumble. I want you to be the guardian, I corrected. The deed will be in your name. The house will be yours, legally. I will pay you a fair rent. And when Marcus comes to you, and he will, demanding to sell or borrow against it, you will do what I cannot. You will tell him no. You will set the terms for his redemption. A sad, knowing smile touched Mr. Solomon's lips. He will hate me. He already hates what he's becoming, I whispered. I'd rather he hate a stranger than destroy himself and the memory of his father. The papers were drawn up. A private, legal sale for $1 and other valuable considerations. I signed my house over to Mr. Solomon. The deed was filed. It was done. So when Marcus slid his forged quitclaim deed across my table this morning, he was asking me to sign a piece of paper that was already worthless. The house was already gone. I let my pen touch the paper. I signed a false name, my mother's maiden name, a final, small rebellion. He wouldn't check. He was too busy winning. Thanks, Ma, he said, snatching the paper, a real smile breaking through now. You won't regret this. I'm gonna make us rich. He folded his future, his freedom, into his back pocket, gave me a peck on the cheek, and walked out, already on his phone. It's done, I heard him say before the door closed. I sat at the table, in my house that wasn't mine, and looked at the empty bacon plate. The game was in motion. My son thought he held all the cards. He had no idea the table itself now belonged to Mr. Solomon. And the first lesson was about to be dealt. Marcus didn't come home that night. The signed deed was a key in his pocket, and I knew he was out trying to turn it into cash. I sat in the living room, in the dark, listening to the old house settle. Every creak sounded like a sigh. My father's clock ticked on the mantel, measuring the distance between the boy I raised and the stranger whose footsteps I now dreaded. The next morning, the doorbell rang at exactly 8:05 a.m. It wasn't Marcus. A man stood on my porch. He was my age, dressed in a worn but neat leather jacket and jeans. He had a calm, weary face, the kind that has seen too much to be surprised anymore. He held a clipboard. Mrs. Evelyn Cole? He asked. Yes. Ma'am, my name is Carl. I'm here on behalf of the new property owner, Mr. Solomon, for the routine asset assessment. His voice was polite, professional, devoid of threat. That somehow made it worse. The plan was beginning. My stomach nodded, but I nodded, stepping aside. Of course. Come in. Carl moved through my home with a quiet, respectful efficiency. He didn't snoop. He assessed. He noted the peeling paint in the hallway, the aging water heater in the closet, the solid oak floors. He took pictures on a tablet. He was making a record of his boss's investment. The roof is about 15 years old, I heard myself say, as if I were a real estate agent. The furnace was serviced last fall. Noted, ma'am, Carl said, giving me a kind, almost pitying look. He understood the charade. He was part of the theater Mr. Solomon had arranged. He was in Marcus's old room when we heard the front door slam open. Ma. You will not believe the runaround I'm getting. Marcus's voice boomed through the house, angry and triumphant. These bloodsuckers at the title company want surveys and liens. I told them it's a simple transfer from my mother. He burst into the hallway, stopping dead when he saw Carl standing in his childhood bedroom doorway, holding a tablet. "Who the hell are you?" Marcus's voice dropped, low and dangerous. Carl didn't flinch. He extended a hand. "Carl. I'm with Solomon Properties. We're doing an assessment for the owner." Marcus stared at the hand, then at me, his confusion turning to dawning, ugly comprehension. "The owner? Ma, what is he talking about?" This was the moment. The first twist of the knife I had carefully forged. I clasped my hands in front of me, my face a mask of pained regret. "Marcus, there's something I didn't tell you." "Tell me what?" he demanded, stepping toward Carl. "Get out of my house." "It's not your house, son," Carl said gently, but with an immovable finality. He pulled a folded document from his clipboard, a copy of the recorded deed. "The title transferred to Mr. Solomon 3 weeks ago. I'm here assessing his property. Mrs. Cole is the legal tenant." The air left Marcus's lungs in a sharp gasp. He looked at me, his eyes wide with pure, animal betrayal. You sold it? You sold our house? To some slumlord?" He snatched the paper from Carl's hands, his eyes scanning the legal language, the notary stamp, my genuine signature. "I had to," I said, the script Valerie and I had prepared coming out in a trembling rush. "The bank, the second mortgage you took, Marcus. They were going to foreclose. This was the only way to save any equity. Mr. Solomon paid it off. He lets me stay. For rent." I watched the lies, woven with threads of his own crime, wrap around him. The color drained from his face. His scheme, his perfect solution, had crashed into a truth he'd created. "You had no right," he shouted, crumbling the deed copy in his fist. "This was my house. My future. Your future was a forged loan that would have left us both on the street." I fired back, a flash of real anger breaking through. What was I supposed to do, Marcus? Wait for the sheriff to put my things on the lawn? He was speechless, vibrating with rage and panic. He turned to Carl. "I want to see this Solomon. Right now. You tell him I want to buy it back. Today." Carl shook his head, a masterclass in calm. "Mr. Solomon doesn't do business that way. He believes in stewardship. He's not interested in selling. But he is a reasonable man. He might be open to discussing other arrangements." "What arrangements?" Marcus spat. "That's between you and him," Carl said, handing Marcus a plain white business card. It had only a phone number and an address, the hardware store on MLK. "He's there most days after 10. Carl gave me a slight, almost imperceptible nod, then let himself out, leaving a silence so heavy it felt like the walls were pressing in. Marcus stared at the card, then at the crumpled deed in his other hand. The 2 pieces of paper that represented his ruin. The entitled fury was gone, replaced by something worse, a desperate, calculating confusion. "You signed it over to a stranger," he whispered, the words hollow. "I saved our home," I corrected softly. "You can still live here, Marcus. As my son. Not as the owner. There's a difference." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for a second I saw the little boy who'd scraped his knee and needed his mom. But it was gone in a blink, replaced by the hardened man. "You don't understand anything," he muttered, shoving the card in his pocket. "I had a plan. I had it all worked out." He turned and walked out, the door closing softly this time. No slam. Just the quiet click of a lock. I walked to the window and watched him get into his car, his head bowed over the steering wheel. I knew where he was going. To the only lifeline he had left. He was going to see Mr. Solomon. He was going to walk into the guardian's den, thinking he could negotiate, bully, or charm his way out. He had no idea that Mr. Solomon had been watching him for years. Waiting for the day the boy would finally need saving from himself. My plan was no longer just a secret. It was in motion. And my son was now a pawn, walking right into the heart of the board, believing he was still a king. Marcus didn't come home that night either. I pictured him sleeping in his car outside the hardware store, waiting for it to open, rehearsing his demands. Mr. Solomon had called me at dusk, his voice a low, steady rumble over the phone. "He's here. Parked out front. The boy looks like he's carrying the world on his back." "Be gentle with him, Mr. Solomon," I'd asked, my heart a frantic bird in my chest. "Gentle isn't what he needs, Evelyn," he replied. "He needs solid ground. Even if it feels like concrete." At 10:02 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. A picture. It showed Marcus, standing in the narrow aisle of Solomon's hardware, surrounded by bins of nails and coils of rope. Mr. Solomon was behind the old oak counter, arms crossed, listening. Marcus's posture was all aggressive pleading, leaning forward, hands spread. Even in the grainy photo, I could see the sheen of desperate sweat on his temple. The text below read, "The ask begins. He wants $150,000. Cash. Says it's his inheritance." I put the phone down, my hands cold. $150,000. Not to buy the house back. For a clean start. My son saw my home, his father's legacy, as a quick-hit ATM. An hour later, another text. This time a voice recording. I pressed play, my heart in my throat. "Look, I get it, you're a businessman." Marcus's voice was strained, trying for smooth but landing on frantic. "This is a prime property. You could flip it for double. I'm offering you a straight profit. Just give me my cut now, and you walk away clean. No realtors, no fuss." A long pause filled only by the faint hum of fluorescent lights. Then, Mr. Solomon's voice, calm as deep water. "Your cut, boy? You didn't put the down payment on that house. You didn't sweat to pay the mortgage for 30 years. You didn't nurse a dying man in its back bedroom. What you have is a mother's love, and you're trying to pawn it. Don't you talk about my family." Marcus snapped. "I am talking about your family," Mr. Solomon replied, and I could hear the shift, the steel entering his tone. "I knew your grandfather. He painted this storefront. Honest work for honest pay. Your father fixed my delivery truck more than once and refused to take a dime. They were men of substance. You come in here smelling of poor decisions and fast money, talking about your cut of a woman's sacrifice. You have no cut. You have a debt." The recording ended. I sat there, the silence in my kitchen roaring in my ears. Mr. Solomon wasn't just saying no. He was holding up a mirror, and the reflection was shattering Marcus. The third text came just after noon. No picture, no audio. Just 5 words from Mr. Solomon. "He has taken the offer." My breath caught. What offer? We had discussed terms, but they were vague: work, structure, responsibility. I called Mr. Solomon, my fingers trembling. "He's agreed," Mr. Solomon said without preamble. "He will work for me. 6 days a week. He will learn a trade. He will be accountable for his time, his actions, and a portion of the debt he created with that forged loan. Every dollar he earns here, half goes to repay that loan to you, held in a trust. The other half, he keeps. He lives under your roof, under your rules, as a tenant paying rent. Or he finds somewhere else to sleep." It was brutal. It was perfect. It stripped Marcus of every illusion, the get-rich-quick scheme, the ownership of the house, his autonomy. It cornered him with the 2 things he'd been running from: work and consequence. He agreed to this? I whispered, incredulous. His alternative was me calling the district attorney about that forged notary stamp on the loan papers, Mr. Solomon said, no trace of triumph in his voice. It wasn't a choice. It was a lifeline. He grabbed it. Angrily, but he grabbed it. Marcus came home just after sundown. He moved like a ghost, hollowed out. He didn't look at me. He went straight to the basement, to the room he'd been using, and closed the door. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. The next morning, a Saturday, he was up before dawn. I heard the shower, the clink of a single coffee mug. At 6:30 a.m., he stood in the kitchen doorway, dressed in old jeans and a plain t-shirt. He looked younger, stripped of his designer armor. "I have to be at the store at 7, he said, his voice flat. "I'll be back by 6. "Okay," I said, pushing a brown paper bag across the table. "Lunch." He stared at the bag like it was a foreign object, then gave a short, sharp nod, taking it without a word. He left, the door clicking shut with a finality that echoed. I spent the day in a strange state of suspended animation. At 10 a.m., I drove downtown. I parked across the street from Solomon's Hardware. Through the dusty window, I saw him. Marcus was sweeping the same stretch of floor by the entrance, his movements stiff with resentment. Mr. Solomon pointed to a shelf of paint cans. Marcus began moving them, one by one, to another shelf, then back again. It was senseless, physical labor. A lesson in doing what you're told, even when you don't see the point. My heart ached. This was my doing. I had reduced my college-educated son to moving paint cans under the watchful eye of an old man. Just as I was about to leave, a sleek black SUV pulled up. A man in sunglasses got out, someone from Marcus's old life. He clapped Marcus on the shoulder, talking fast, laughing. I saw Marcus shake his head, gesture vaguely toward the store. The friend's smile vanished. He said something short, shook his head in clear disgust, got back in his SUV, and sped off. Marcus stood on the sidewalk, holding his broom, watching the car disappear. His shoulders slumped. In that moment, he wasn't a defiant man or a conniving son. He was a boy, watching his old world drive away without him, left holding a tool he didn't know how to use. He turned and went back inside. Mr. Solomon handed him a clipboard and sent him to the stockroom to take inventory. I drove home, tears finally streaming down my face. Not tears of sadness, but of a painful, terrible hope. The first brick of his new foundation had been laid. It was humility. And it was breaking him to build him. The war wasn't for the house. I saw that now. The war was for my son's soul. And I had just enlisted the unlikeliest of generals, an old man with a hardware store and a memory of what his father used to be. The new rhythm was a strange, grinding music. The alarm at 5:45 a.m. The silent breakfast. The departure at 6:30. Marcus returned each evening at exactly 6:15, smelling of sawdust, mineral spirits, and a new, deep-seated exhaustion. He'd eat whatever I left covered on the stove without comment, shower, and retreat to the basement. We were housemates, not family. The silence between us was a living thing, feeding on his shame and my guarded hope. A week into this new life, Mr. Solomon called me on a Thursday evening. "Evelyn," he said, his tone carrying a note of grim satisfaction. "The boy can count." "What?" "Inventory." I had him do a full stock count. He complained it was beneath him. I told him a man who can't account for what's in front of him has no business dreaming of what isn't. He did it. And he found a discrepancy. My breath caught. "He stole something?" "No," Mr. Solomon said, and I could almost hear the shake of his head. "He found where someone else had. The delivery driver from the plumbing supply company has been shorting us for months, counting on nobody checking the skids against the manifest. Marcus checked. He found a pattern. Saved me over $2,000 this quarter." A strange pride, fierce and painful, bloomed in my chest. My son, the would-be schemer, had used his knack for seeing angles to spot a real crime. He'd chosen to expose it. "What did you do?" I asked. I paid him a finder's fee. $50. Told him it was the first honest money he'd probably earned in a year. He looked at that bill like it was a live snake. Mr. Solomon paused. He's starting to see the board, Evelyn. Not just his next desperate move, but the whole game. The next evening, Marcus didn't go straight to the basement. He stood awkwardly in the kitchen doorway, holding a white envelope. "Here," he said, not meeting my eyes. He tossed the envelope on the table. It skidded to a stop in front of me. Inside was $200 in crisp 20s, and a handwritten note on Solomon's hardware letterhead. Week 1. Wages, $400. Half to debt repayment, trust ACCT #H772 $200. Half to tenant Marcus Cole, $200. Rent due to property owner, Solomon $150. Balance forward to tenant, $50. See attached work log. It was a ledger. Brutally simple. For every dollar earned, 50 cents was going to repay the loan he'd forged in my name. He was paying rent to Mr. Solomon. He was left with $50 for a week of his life. He was watching me read it, his jaw tight. "He's treating me like a child," Marcus muttered, the resentment simmering just below the surface. "He's treating you like a debtor," I corrected softly, folding the note. "There's a difference. Children don't get paid. Or held accountable." He flinched. The truth was a weapon I was learning to wield with precision. $50, he scoffed, but the bluster was gone. It was a whisper of defeat. "I can't do anything with $50. What did you used to do with the money you got from forging my signature?" I asked, the question hanging in the air like a guillotine. He stared at me, his eyes flashing with a mixture of anger and shock that I'd say it aloud. He didn't answer. He turned and went downstairs. But the ledger had done its work. It made the abstract concrete. His time had a price. His betrayal had a cost. And the price was achingly low. The following Monday, I went to the store again. This time I went inside. The bell over the door jingled. Marcus was at the back, teaching an older woman how to replace a washer on a leaky faucet. He was patient, his hands sure as he showed her the tools. "You're a natural, young man," she said, beaming. He gave a stiff, awkward smile. "Just following Mr. Solomon's instructions, ma'am." I saw it then. Not just humility, but the faintest spark of competence. Of usefulness. Mr. Solomon saw me and nodded toward his cramped office in the back. I followed. "He's asking questions," Mr. Solomon said, lowering himself into his creaking chair. "Not about money. About profit margins on light bulbs. About why we stock 3 grades of sandpaper. He's starting to see the business, not just the job." "And the other business?" I asked, my voice low. "His old friends?" Mr. Solomon's face darkened. "They've come by. The one in the SUV. He sits outside sometimes." Marcus ignores him. Yesterday, the man came in. Demanded to speak to Marcus in private. I walked over and put my hand on the boy's shoulder. I said, "Anything you have to say to my employee, you can say to his supervisor." The man left. He hasn't been back. He looked at me, his gaze steady. "He's making a choice, Evelyn. Every hour he stays here, he's choosing this." I left the store, a fragile hope taking root. But when I got home, I found the first crack in our new foundation. Marcus's basement door was ajar. He was still at work. On impulse, I went down. The room was neat, almost militaristic. On his small desk, next to his phone, was a notepad. Doodled on the top corner wasn't a sketch or a reminder. It was a series of calculations. $150,000 sale, $82,000 mortgage equals $68K asterisk. Asterisk $68K, 10% fee equals $61,200. My cut? He was still dreaming of the quick score. The ledger was teaching him the cost of his past, but this scribble was the ghost of his future plans. He was running numbers on a house that wasn't his to sell, for a cut he would never get. The hope curdled into a cold dread. The lesson wasn't sticking. He was just biding his time, doing the math, waiting for his chance to renegotiate. I didn't touch the notepad. I went back upstairs, my heart a stone. When he came home that night, I was waiting. I placed Mr. Solomon's ledger note from the first week on the table. Next to it, I placed a photocopy of the forged loan papers from the bank. 2 ledgers, Marcus, I said, my voice quiet in the evening gloom. One tells you where your money goes. The other tells you where your character went. You can keep working on the first one. But until you understand the second, you'll just be serving time. Not building a life. He looked from the cold, clinical bank forgery to the handwritten note of his meager wages. For the first time I saw not anger, but a dawning, horrifying comprehension. He wasn't just losing money. He was losing himself, line by line, in both columns. He didn't speak. He picked up the bank papers, his hand trembling slightly, and went downstairs. This time, he didn't close the door. He left it open, a narrow rectangle of yellow light cutting into the dark hallway. An invitation, or a surrender, I didn't know. But the silence from the basement that night wasn't the silence of resentment. It was the heavy, echoing silence of a man alone in a room, finally starting to read the full ledger of his life. And the bottom line was staring back, a number deep in the red. The open door was not an invitation to talk. It was a white flag. A silent admission that the walls he'd built were too heavy to maintain. I respected it. I didn't go down. But I listened to the new sounds from the basement, not the frustrated pacing or the low murmur of secret phone calls, but the long stretches of quiet, and the occasional rustle of paper. A few days later, on my weekly visit to Solomon's Hardware, I found Marcus not on the floor, but in the cluttered back office, hunched over the ancient, wheezing computer. Mr. Solomon stood behind him, pointing at the screen. See this? Mr. Solomon's voice was a low rumble. Vendor cost. This is retail. The difference isn't just profit. It's rent, lights, my time, your wage. You don't get to the good number, he tapped the screen, without understanding all the little numbers that tried to eat it first. Marcus was nodding, actually nodding, his brow furrowed in concentration. He didn't look up when the bell jingled. He was immersed. I bought a light bulb I didn't need and left, a fragile warmth spreading through the cold dread that had settled since seeing his notepad calculations. He was learning the language of legitimate gain. It was a slow, boring language, but it was real. That evening, he came up for dinner without being called. He sat, ate the stew, and then, without preamble, slid a folded piece of paper across the table. It was a blueprint. Or a sketch of one. Mr. Solomon wants to expand the storage shed out back, he said, his eyes on his plate. He asked me to draft a materials list. Calculate the board feet, the hardware, the cost. I unfolded the paper. It was meticulous. Measurements in clear print. A list of 2x4s, sheets of plywood, nails, hinges. At the bottom, a total cost was circled, $1,842.75. It was the first thing he'd given me in months that wasn't a demand or a lie. It was a plan. A small, honest, physical plan to build something. This is very detailed, Marcus, I said, my voice thick. He shrugged, a defensive gesture. It's just math. And the catalog. It's more than that. I traced the line of the proposed roofline. You used to hate math. I used to hate a lot of things that were good for me, he mumbled, then seemed surprised by his own words. He stood up quickly, taking his plate to the sink. It's just a list. But it wasn't. It was a receipt for a week of paying attention. A blueprint for a version of himself that could construct instead of conspire. The next afternoon, a delivery truck arrived at the house. Not at the store, here. 2 men unloaded a stack of lumber and hardware onto my driveway, right on the sketch Marcus had drawn. My heart hammered. Mr. Solomon was moving fast. When Marcus's old car pulled in at 6:15, he stopped dead, staring at the pile. He got out slowly, walking around it as if it were a mirage. "What is this?" he asked, his voice wary. "It's your list," I said from the porch. Mr. Solomon had it delivered. He said if you can count it, you can build it. Marcus touched a stack of 2x4s, his fingers brushing the rough, treated wood. The reality of it, the sheer tangible there-ness of the project, seemed to overwhelm him. This wasn't a theoretical number in a bank account. This was splinters and sweat and the possibility of something standing where there had been nothing. I've never built anything," he said, a confession that sounded ripped from him. "Then you'll learn," I said. "Or it'll sit here and rot." His money, your failure. The challenge hung in the air. He looked from the wood to his hands, soft from a life of keyboards and scheming, and I saw the fear. Not of hard work, but of being inadequate at it. Of failing at something honest. He didn't touch it again that night. But Saturday morning, he was in the driveway by 7. He'd printed instructions from the internet. He laid out the tools Mr. Solomon had sent over, a circular saw, a level, a square. He measured the same board 5 times before he made his first cut. The whine of the saw was a new sound in our world. I watched from the kitchen window as he wrestled with the wood, his movements clumsy at first, then gradually more sure. He sweat through his shirt by 10 a.m. He cursed when a board split. He recut. He learned. Mr. Solomon drove by in his old truck around noon. He didn't stop. He just slowed, looked at the progress, the beginnings of a wall frame taking shape on the grass, gave a single, satisfied nod, and drove on. By Sunday evening, the skeleton of the shed stood in my backyard. It was square. It was plumb. It was real. Marcus stood back, covered in sawdust and dirt, drinking a glass of water. He didn't look triumphant. He looked exhausted, and profoundly quiet. "It needs siding and a roof," he said, as if reporting to himself. "Next weekend's delivery," I said, handing him a towel. He took it, his eyes still fixed on the structure. I kept thinking I'd mess it up. Waste all that wood. "But you didn't." "No," he said softly. "I didn't." That night, the notepad with the $150,000 calculations was in the kitchen garbage can. On top of the coffee grounds and eggshells. He hadn't torn it out. He'd placed the whole pad there, closed. He was choosing which blueprint to follow. But peace, I was learning, was a shallow route. On Monday, while Marcus was at work, a different car pulled up. A late-model sedan, government plates. A woman in a sharp blazer got out, carrying a folder. "Mrs. Cole?" "I'm Lisa Grafton from the county assessor's office. We've received a query about a recent unpermitted structure on this property." She smiled, professional and pitiless. "A shed?" My blood ran cold. Marcus's shed. His first honest thing. "There must be a mistake," I said, my voice tight. "It's just a small storage shed." "All structures over a certain size require a permit," she said, consulting her folder. This was reported anonymously. "We'll need to see the permits, or the structure will have to come down. There's also a fine for noncompliance." Reported anonymously. The words were a kick to the chest. Marcus's old friend in the SUV. The one who'd been circling. He wasn't trying to lure Marcus back anymore. He was trying to destroy what Marcus was building. This wasn't an attack on the shed. It was an attack on the blueprint. On the new, fragile framework of a better man. And the weapon was the very system Mr. Solomon and I were using to teach Marcus responsibility. The irony was vicious. I thought of the notepad in the trash. He'd thrown one dream away. And now someone from his past was trying to bulldoze the new one before it was even finished. The war had just changed fronts. It was no longer just about saving Marcus from himself. It was about protecting the good thing he was finally building from the ghosts who couldn't stand to see him succeed. The county woman left me with a yellow notice of violation taped to my front door, flapping in the breeze like a flag of defeat. It listed the code, the fine, $500, and the deadline for compliance, 10 days. Remove the shed or produce the permit. 10 days. Marcus's shed, the square, plumb evidence of his change, was now a countdown clock to his failure. I didn't call him at work. I drove straight to Solomon's Hardware, the violation notice crumpled in my fist. The bell jingled with a sound of alarm. Marcus was at the counter with a customer. Mr. Solomon saw my face and came out from the back, guiding me silently into the office. I smoothed the yellow paper on his desk. Someone reported him. Anonymously. Mr. Solomon read it, his expression not changing, but his eyes turned to flint. The man in the SUV, he stated. It has to be. He's not trying to get Marcus back. He's trying to prove that going straight is a joke. That the rules are just there to punish you. My voice shook with a rage I hadn't felt before. This was sabotage of the soul. We will get the permit, Mr. Solomon said, his voice a bedrock of calm. It's a 10-day deadline. The permit office takes weeks, and they'll want engineered drawings for something this small. It's a trap. They want him to fail. Mr. Solomon leaned back, steepling his fingers. Then we do not play their game. We play a better one. He looked at me, a slow, calculating smile touching his lips. The shed is on my property, yes? Yes, but nothing. The violation is issued to the property owner. That's me. Not Marcus. He picked up the phone, dialed a number from memory. Valerie? It's Solomon. I need a land use attorney, one who likes to make bureaucrats dizzy. And I need them yesterday. He listened, then hung up. Your cousin is sending someone. A shark, she says. Meanwhile, we do not stop building. We accelerate. When Marcus came into the office for his break, we showed him the notice. His face, which had been losing its hardened edges, went tight and pale. The old, familiar anger flashed, the rage of a cornered animal. This is Tyler. That snake. I'll kill him. You will do nothing of the sort, Mr. Solomon said, his voice cutting through the fury. That is what he wants. He wants you back in that world, reacting, not thinking. He is afraid of the man you are building out back. Marcus's hands were fists. So what? I just let him tear it down? No, I said, stepping forward. You finish it. You finish it so well, so perfectly, that it becomes the reason he loses. Mr. Solomon nodded. The attorney will handle the county. You will handle the wood. Tonight, we work. We get the siding on. We get it sealed. We make it a fact. And so, after the store closed, a strange crew assembled in my backyard under the glare of construction lights Mr. Solomon brought, Marcus, me, Mr. Solomon, and Carl, the quiet assessor, who turned out to be a wizard with a nail gun. We worked in near silence, the only sounds the punch of the nail gun, the scrape of saws, and the rustle of siding panels. Marcus took direction, his earlier rage channeled into furious, precise labor. He was learning another lesson. True power wasn't in the explosion of anger, but in the steady, relentless drive of a nail into solid wood. At one point, he looked at me holding a panel steady, sawdust in my hair. You don't have to do this, Ma. Yes, I do, I said, meeting his eyes. This is my fight, too. He held my gaze for a long moment, then gave a single, sharp nod. A partnership, forged in plywood and defiance. By midnight, the shed was fully sided, its door hung. It was no longer a skeleton. It was a fortress. 2 days later, the shark arrived. Her name was Daniela Ruiz, a compact woman in a sharp suit who carried the scent of expensive coffee and victory. She met with Mr. Solomon, then went to the county offices. She didn't argue for a permit. She attacked the complaint itself. She filed a Freedom of Information Act request for the anonymous tip. She argued selective enforcement, presenting photos of a dozen similar unpermitted sheds in the neighborhood. She hinted at a potential discrimination lawsuit, given the specific targeting of a property owned by an elderly black businessman and improved by his black employee. The county, faced with a fight they didn't want and a timeline they couldn't justify, folded. The violation was rescinded. A retroactive after-the-fact permit was issued with a minor administrative fee, paid by Mr. Solomon. Daniela brought the paperwork to the hardware store. She handed it to Marcus. "Consider it a lesson in civic engagement," she said with a thin smile. "The system can be a tool or a weapon. Depends who's holding the handle." Marcus stared at the permit, the official stamp, the bureaucratic approval of his work. It was a different kind of blueprint. A legal one. He looked from Daniela to Mr. Solomon to me, understanding dawning. We had outmaneuvered his enemy not with threats, but with better paperwork, smarter strategy, and unwavering unity. "Thank you," he said, the words thick in his throat. That Saturday, Marcus put the roof on the shed. As he nailed down the last shingle, Tyler's SUV cruised slowly down the street. It stopped. The window rolled down. Tyler stared at the completed, perfect little structure, at Marcus high on a ladder, triumphant in a way no fast cash could ever provide. Marcus didn't look at him. He climbed down, picked up a broom, and began sweeping up the debris, his back to the street. A silent, profound dismissal. The SUV sat there for a full minute. Then it sped off, the engine roaring with impotent rage. That evening, Marcus presented me with a key. He'd installed a lock on the shed door. "For you," he said. "For garden tools. Or whatever." I took the key, its metal warm from his hand. It was the second key he'd ever given me. The first was to a forged lockbox of despair. This one was to a house he'd built with his own hands. "It's beautiful, son." "It's square," he said, a flicker of his old sarcasm, but it was gentle now. "That's what matters." He went inside, leaving me in the twilight with the shed. I unlocked it. The smell of fresh wood and ambition filled my senses. It was empty, but it was full of promise. The victory was sweet. But as I looked at the neat, shingled roof against the darkening sky, I remembered Daniela Ruiz's words. The system can be a tool or a weapon. We had just wielded it as a tool to protect us. But I knew, with a mother's cold intuition, that Tyler wouldn't just slink away. He'd been humiliated. He'd seen his old pawn become a knight, protected by a king and queen he hadn't accounted for. He would switch tactics. If he couldn't use the system against Marcus, he'd find a weapon outside of it. The game wasn't over. We'd just won the first major battle. And the next attack wouldn't be on something Marcus had built. It would be aimed at the builders themselves. The shed stood as a quiet monument for a week. Marcus's posture at the hardware store changed. He didn't just take orders, he anticipated them. He started opening the store on Saturdays without being asked. Mr. Solomon began leaving him alone at the register for short periods, a trust that was never spoken but was felt in the weight of the keys left on the counter. The paper ledger continued. Every Friday, the envelope appeared on the kitchen table. The debt repayment line was creeping upward. The tenant balance was still pitiful, but he'd opened a savings account at the credit union next door to the hardware store. He showed me the first deposit slip one evening, a shy, almost boyish pride in his eyes. 5% APY, he said, as if it were a magic spell. I was starting to believe in the spell. I was starting to sleep through the night. Then, on a Tuesday, the spell broke. I was pruning the rose bushes his father had planted when a shadow fell over me. It was Carl, Mr. Solomon's man. His calm face was etched with a tension I'd never seen. "Mrs. Cole. You need to come to the store. Now." My shears fell from my hands. "Marcus? He's okay. Physically. But there's a situation." I didn't ask. I got in my car and followed him. The usual calm of Solomon's hardware was gone. The closed sign was flipped, but the door was unlocked. Inside, Marcus stood behind the counter, his face ashen, fists clenched on the worn oak. Mr. Solomon sat on a stool, looking older than I'd ever seen him. And between them, leaning against a rack of garden hoses with casual menace, was Tyler. He was bigger than I remembered, with a cold, assessing gaze that swept over me as I entered. Mrs. Cole. Finally. The matriarch. Get out, I said, my voice low and steady, surprising even me. Tyler chuckled, a dry, unpleasant sound. See, that's the problem. There's an exit fee. Marcus here understands. Don't you, Mark? Marcus wouldn't look at me. His eyes were fixed on a knot in the wood grain of the counter. What does he want, Marcus? I asked. It was Mr. Solomon who answered, his voice a glacier. He has produced a document. A debt. From before. Tyler pushed off the rack and sauntered to the counter, placing a single, creased paper next to Marcus's fist. It wasn't a formal contract. It was a handwritten IOU, the numbers scribbled in Marcus's familiar, rushed script. IOU, $8,500. For investment capital. Payable on demand. Marcus Cole. Below it, a list of dates with smaller, escalating amounts, $500, $1,200, all initialed by Marcus. A running tab of desperation. A gentleman's agreement, Tyler said, tapping the paper. But gentlemen pay their debts. My associates are getting impatient. They don't care about sheds or hardware stores. They care about balance sheets. This was for the crypto scheme, Marcus whispered, finally looking up. His eyes were haunted. The one that collapsed. He said it was a loan. He didn't say. He didn't say the VIG would double every month you didn't pay? Tyler finished, smiling. That's just business, my friend. The current total, with considerations for my patients, is $17,200. Let's call it an even 17 for old time's sake. $17,000. More than a year of Marcus's meager, hard-earned wages at the ledger's rate. An impossible sum. This is usury, Mr. Solomon stated. This is a signed promise, Tyler corrected. And my associates have ways of collecting that don't involve courts. They're artists, really. They turn debt into motivation. The unspoken threat hung in the air, a pall of violence. This was the weapon from outside the system. Crude, brutal, and effective. You have no claim here, I said, stepping between Tyler and my son. I have a claim on him, Tyler said, his eyes locking on Marcus. And he works here. He lives with you. That makes his problems communal. His gaze swept the store. Such a nice little place. Would be a shame if a fire inspector found violations. Or if a delivery truck accidentally smashed that pretty front window. Repeatedly. He was no longer just threatening Marcus. He was threatening the shed, the store, the fragile new world we'd built. You have a week, Tyler said, picking up the IOU and tucking it into his jacket. 17,000. Cash. Or we start collecting in other ways. Starting with the art. He gave a mock salute and strolled out, the bell jingling merrily behind him. The silence he left was suffocating. Marcus sank onto the stool behind the counter, his head in his hands. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Ma. Mr. Solomon. I didn't know. I was drowning, and he threw me an anchor made of lead. Mr. Solomon was silent for a long time, staring at the door. Then he spoke, not to Marcus, but to me. This is the old ledger, Evelyn. The one written in blood and foolishness. It must be settled, or it will never stop collecting interest. How? I asked, despair clawing at my throat. We don't have that kind of money. No, Mr. Solomon agreed. But we have something else. He turned to Marcus. You have a week. You will get him the money. Marcus's head snapped up. How? Rob the store? No, Mr. Solomon said, a fierce light in his old eyes. You will earn it. A job. A real job. One that uses the skills you've been learning, for a client who pays in large sums for discreet work. Marcus looked bewildered. I was, too. Mr. Solomon went to his office and returned with a business card. It was for a restoration company that worked on historic homes. I know the owner. They have an emergency job, a Victorian porch that's rotted through. The crew lead broke his leg. They need someone who can read a blueprint, manage a small crew of day laborers, and get it done in 4 days. The pay is $5,000. Up front, for materials and to secure you. $5,000, that's not 17, Marcus said, hopeless. It's a down payment, Mr. Solomon said. It shows good faith. It buys time. And it proves to Tyler that you are not a deadbeat, but a man with earning potential. Men like him understand potential. They'd rather get paid over time than have to break a useful asset. It was a dangerous gamble. It meant sending Marcus into the orbit of legitimate money, under immense pressure, with the wolves at the door. Can you do it? I asked my son, searching his face. He looked at the card, then at Mr. Solomon's steady gaze, then at my terrified hope. The shame in his eyes hardened into something else. Resolve. I can read a blueprint, he said, his voice gaining strength. I can manage a crew. I built a shed. A porch is just a shed people sit on, Mr. Solomon said, a ghost of a smile on his lips. Go. Call them now. You start tomorrow at dawn. Marcus took the card and went to the back office, closing the door. I turned to Mr. Solomon. What if he fails? What if Tyler doesn't care about potential? Then we have a different problem, Mr. Solomon said quietly. But this is the final lesson, Evelyn. He must face the true cost of his old life, and he must pay it with the currency of his new one. Not with your money, or my money. With his sweat, his skill, and his nerve. That is the only receipt that will ever clear this debt. Outside, the sky was darkening. Marcus was on the phone, his voice a low, earnest murmur. He was negotiating his own salvation, not with a scheme, but with a promise of honest work. The ledger had just presented its ultimate bill. And my son, for the first time, was not running from it. He was calculating the cost, and squaring his shoulders to meet it. The quiet war was over. The loud, desperate battle for his soul had just begun. Marcus left before dawn the next morning with Mr. Solomon's old truck, loaded with tools from the store. He looked like a soldier heading to a front line, his jaw set, the blueprint for the Victorian porch tucked under his arm. He didn't say goodbye. He just nodded, a grim, determined gesture. I didn't go to the store. I went to the bank. I sat in my car in the parking lot for an hour, staring at the brick building. Inside my safe deposit box was the last of my rainy day fund, for $300 I'd scraped together from freelance bookkeeping over the years. It was for my roof, for a medical emergency. For a real crisis. This was a real crisis. The thought was a siren song. I could take it. Add it to Marcus's $5,000. It would be almost half. I could go to Tyler myself, show him the cash, plead for more time. A mother's intervention. But Mr. Solomon's words echoed. He must pay it with the currency of his new one. If I paid, it would just be another bailout. Another time I cleaned up the mess, making the cost of his mistakes something I carried, not him. It would reset the ledger back to zero for him, but it would debit my account, my security, my peace. Again. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. The instinct to protect my child was a physical ache. But the wiser, harder voice said protection wasn't always a shield. Sometimes, it was a faith so fierce it looked like abandonment. I started the car and drove away from the bank. I drove to the address of the restoration job instead. It was a beautiful, decaying Victorian on the old, tree-lined side of town. Marcus was already there, standing in the midst of chaos. The entire front porch was a skeleton of rotten wood, partially torn away. 2-day laborers looked at him with bored skepticism. He had the blueprint spread on a sawhorse, pointing, explaining. I parked down the street and watched. He was clumsy at first, his commands unsure. One worker shrugged and lit a cigarette. Marcus's back stiffened. I saw him take a deep breath, then walk over to the man. I couldn't hear the words, but his posture was clear, not aggressive, but firm. He pointed to the pile of fresh lumber, then to the blueprint, then to his watch. The man frowned, tossed his cigarette, and picked up a crowbar. By midday, the rhythm had changed. The old porch was gone, the debris piled neatly. The foundation was exposed and sound. Marcus was cutting stringers for the new steps, his tape measure and square in constant motion. When the restoration company owner came by for an inspection, Marcus walked him through the progress, pointing, explaining his timeline. The owner clapped him on the shoulder, handed him an envelope, and left. Marcus tucked the envelope, the $5,000, into his locked tool chest without counting it. He didn't pause. He went back to work. He worked until the light failed. When he got home, he was covered in a new kind of grime, concrete dust, ancient paint chips, honest filth. He placed the thick envelope on the kitchen table between us. It's all there, he said, his voice raspy with exhaustion. I checked. I know, I said. He looked at the envelope, then at his dirty, bruised hands. I have to take this to him tomorrow. After work. It's not enough. It's something, I said. It's a new line in the ledger. The next 3 days were a blur of tension. Marcus worked like a man possessed. The porch took shape under his hands, the new decking precise, the spindles for the railing perfectly spaced. He was building a testament to his promise under a deadline of threat. On the 4th evening, the porch was done. Painted, pristine, a masterpiece of restoration. The owner came, smiled broadly, and handed Marcus a second, smaller envelope. A bonus. Another $500. Marcus now had $5,500 of the $17,000. It was a hill of beans to a man like Tyler. But it was a mountain Marcus had moved with his own 2 hands. That night, he showered, put on clean clothes, and placed the $5,500 in a plain paper bag. He looked at me, his fear raw in his eyes. Will you come with me? Not to talk. Just, be there. It was the first time he'd asked me to stand with him, not in front of him, in years. Yes, I said. We drove to a sports bar on the east side where Tyler held court. Marcus told me to wait in the car. Please, Ma. Just wait. I watched him walk in, the paper bag looking pitifully small in his hand. My heart hammered against my ribs. 20 minutes later, he emerged. He wasn't beaten. He wasn't crying. He looked emptied out. He got in the car, put his hands on the wheel, and stared straight ahead. He took it, Marcus said flatly. Laughed. Said it was cute. Said the VIG still runs. He wants the remaining 11.5 by the end of the month. Or he starts with the store. The despair was a living thing in the car. He had done everything right, worked, delivered, paid, and it wasn't enough. The old ledger's interest was predatory, designed to be impossible. We drove home in silence. When we pulled into the driveway, Marcus didn't get out. He just sat there, looking at the shed, his symbol of hope now mocking him in the dark. I can't do it, he whispered. I can't earn that in time. I'll have to. Have to what? I asked, my voice sharp. He didn't answer. He just shook his head. We went inside. He went straight to the basement. I heard the sound of his desk drawer opening, then the distinct, heavy thump of his old, locked metal box hitting the wood. The box where he used to keep things he didn't want me to see. A cold terror seized me. Was there a gun in there? Was he planning something desperate? I stood at the top of the stairs, listening to the frantic rustle of paper. Then, silence. A long, profound silence. Then, footsteps on the stairs. He emerged, not with a weapon, but with a single, yellowed piece of paper in his hand. His face was pale, but his eyes were clear with a terrible, focused light. "I can't earn it in time," he repeated, but the defeat was gone. It was replaced by cold, calculating clarity. "But I know how he got his start. And I have proof." He handed me the paper. It was a photocopy of a police report from 8 years ago. A burglary at a local jewelry wholesaler. The report listed the items stolen. At the bottom, in the notes, was a single line: "Informant suggests possible involvement of known associate, Tyler Tag Morrison, but insufficient evidence." "I found this when I was working for him," Marcus said, his voice low. "I was supposed to destroy it. I kept it. As insurance. I never had the guts to use it." He looked at me, and I saw the man he could have been: sharp, strategic, but with a moral compass that had finally found true north. He doesn't want the police looking at him again. Not for anything. He's built a veneer of legitimacy. This, he tapped the paper, peels that veneer right off. "This is blackmail, Marcus," I breathed. "No," he said, a grim smile touching his lips. "This is negotiation. This is me presenting a new ledger entry. His freedom, for my debt. A clean write-off." It was dangerous. It was playing with fire. But it was the first move he'd conceived that wasn't born of greed or fear. It was born of justice, and a fierce, protective love for the new life he was building. He had tried to pay with honest currency, and it had been mocked. So now he would pay with the only currency Tyler understood: leverage. My son wasn't running. He wasn't begging. He wasn't even fighting fair. He was finally playing the game like the man he'd been raised to be. And he was about to checkmate the king of his old, rotten world. Marcus didn't sleep. He spent the night at the kitchen table with a notepad, drafting and redrafting what he would say. He wasn't writing a plea, he was writing a script for a transaction. He showed it to me at dawn, the words stark under the kitchen light. "Tyler. The debt is $11,500. I have proof tying you to the Henderson jewelry job. The police report with your name. My copy. The original is in a safe place, set to be mailed to the cold case unit if anything happens to me, my mother, or Mr. Solomon's business. You void my debt. All of it. I destroy my copy. We're square. You stay in your lane, I stay in mine. This is the only offer." It was cold. It was dangerous. It was utterly fearless. "He'll call your bluff," I said, my throat tight. "It's not a bluff," Marcus replied, his eyes holding a steel I hadn't seen since he was a boy defending a friend on the playground. "I mailed the original to Daniela Ruiz this morning. With instructions. She's the shark, remember? She'll know what to do with it." He had thought it through. He had moved in the night, while I slept, securing his pieces on the board. My son, the strategist. He didn't go to work. He called Mr. Solomon and told him everything. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, then a single, gruff word: "All right." At 10 a.m., Marcus left. He wore the same clothes he'd worn to deliver the cash, clean, simple, no armor. The only thing in his pocket was the photocopy and his phone, set to record. He didn't tell me he was recording it. I just knew. I didn't follow. I sat at the kitchen table, the clock ticking louder than my own heartbeat. I prayed not for his safety, but for his strength. For the courage to see it through without folding, and the wisdom not to push too far. An hour later, my phone buzzed. A text from Marcus, at the bar. "He's here." Then, nothing. The silence of the next 45 minutes was an eternity. I wore a path in the kitchen linoleum. I thought of every terrible outcome. I saw the police report in my mind, the line about insufficient evidence. Was it enough? Would Tyler laugh in his face? Would it ignite a war instead of ending one? My phone rang, shrill and terrifying. It was Marcus. "It's done," he said, his voice flat, drained of all emotion. "Are you okay?" "Where are you?" "I'm in the parking lot." "I'm fine." The debt is void. He tore up the IOU in front of me. He has the photocopy. I have a receipt. "Come home," I whispered. When he walked in 20 minutes later, he looked years older. He sat heavily at the table and played the audio recording from his phone. The voices were clear over the muffled sounds of the sports bar. "You've got nerve, bringing me a photocopy of a fairy tale," Tyler's voice, amused, condescending. "The original is with a lawyer. It gets filed if anything happens to us. The debt is gone. That's the deal." Marcus, calm. Shockingly calm. "Or what? You send an old police report?" "They had nothing then, they have nothing now. They have a name. And a reason to look at you again. Closely. For everything. Your associates won't like that spotlight. Your legitimate business partners won't like it either. Is $11,000 worth burning your whole life down?" A long pause. The sound of ice clinking in a glass. "You grew a spine, Mark." "I don't like it." "I don't care what you like. Do we have a deal?" Another pause. Then the sound of paper tearing. "Once, twice. Consider it a gift. For old times. But if that document ever surfaces..." "It won't. We're square." "We are not square. We are nothing. You don't come near me. I don't come near you. That shed, that hardware store, your mama's house, they're ghosts to me. You understand?" Ghosts. Understood. The recording ended. Marcus had won. He had negotiated his freedom. Not with a payment, but with the threat of a truth. He put his head in his hands. He's right. We're not square. I traded a debt for a threat. That's not being clean. That's just owning a different kind of poison. "It's a poison that keeps him away," I said, putting a hand on his shoulder. "You protected your family. You used the truth as a shield. There's honor in that." "Is there?" he asked, looking up, his eyes haunted. "Or did I just prove I'm still the same person, just with a better targeted scheme?" Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. We both froze. It was too soon. It couldn't be. I looked through the peephole. It was Carl. His face was grave. My heart plummeted. Tyler had acted already. He'd broken the deal. I opened the door. "Carl, what's wrong?" "It's Mr. Solomon," Carl said, his voice tight. "He had a spell. At the store. He's in the ambulance now. He was on the phone, arguing with someone, he got agitated, then he just went down." The world tilted. Marcus was beside me in an instant. "What hospital?" "Mercy General." "I'll drive you." We rode in Carl's truck in a stunned silence. The victory of minutes ago was ashes. Mr. Solomon. Our general. Our guardian. At the hospital, we found him in the emergency bay, looking small and ancient amidst the tubes and wires. His eyes were closed. A young doctor spoke to us. "It's a stroke. A significant one. We've stabilized him, but the next 24 hours are critical." He was under severe stress. Who was he arguing with? Marcus and I exchanged a look. The phone call. Had Tyler called him? Threatened the store directly after dealing with Marcus? The guilt on Marcus's face was a physical thing. We took seats in the waiting room. The adrenaline from the confrontation drained away, leaving a cold, sick dread. Our fortress had a crack. Its cornerstone was lying in a hospital bed. I did this, Marcus whispered, staring at the floor. My mess. My debt. It followed me and it hit him. You don't know that, I said, but the doubt was there, a worm in my heart. An hour later, a nurse came out. He's awake. He's weak, but he's asking for you. Just one at a time. Marcus looked at me. You go, Ma. I shook my head. He asked for you. Marcus looked terrified, but he stood and followed the nurse. He was gone for 15 minutes. When he returned, his eyes were red, but his shoulders were straight. In his hand, he clutched a small, brass key, the one to the back door of Solomon's hardware. He gave me this, Marcus said, his voice thick. He said the store is mine to run until he gets back. He said I know the numbers. I know the stock. He said. Marcus swallowed hard. He said, a man who can face down a wolf to protect his flock is ready to mind the store. He looked at the key, then at me, the weight of a legacy, not of debt, but of trust, settling onto his shoulders. The threat was neutralized. The debt was gone. But the cost was lying in a hospital bed, and the reward was a key to a kingdom we never wanted to inherit so soon. The war was over. But the victory felt hollow, and the responsibility was now a door he had to open alone. Mr. Solomon didn't die. But the stroke carved away a piece of him, leaving his right side slow and his speech deliberate, each word a carefully chosen stone laid on a path. He would recover, the doctors said, but he'd never lift a sheet of plywood again. The hardware store, his life's work, needed younger hands. For 2 weeks, Marcus opened the store at 7, closed at 6, and drove to the rehab center every evening to sit with Mr. Solomon, going over the day's receipts, the inventory orders, the petty crises. He wasn't an employee taking notes. He was a steward receiving wisdom. The brass key was no longer a temporary token. It was a covenant. One such evening, I went with him. Mr. Solomon was in a wheelchair by the window, watching the sunset paint the parking lot gold. He turned his head slowly as we entered, a faint smile touching the good side of his mouth. Evelyn, he said, the word clear but effortful. Mr. Solomon. You look strong. Liar, he said, but his eyes sparkled. He looked at Marcus. The Thompson order? Came in this afternoon. I put it on the shelf. Mrs. Garvey needed a specific faucet washer. We had it. Good. Mr. Solomon's gaze was assessing, proud. You see the whole board now. Marcus pulled up a chair. I do. And I want to talk to you about the board. He took a deep breath. The store, it's yours. It's your legacy. But I've been looking at the books, not just this month's, but the last 5 years. You're breaking even. Just. The big box stores are killing you on bulk items. Mr. Solomon nodded slowly. I know. I have an idea, Marcus said, and he pulled out not a sketch, but a proper business plan he'd typed on the store's ancient computer. We stop trying to compete on price. We become the place you come when the big box fails you. We offer workshops, basic plumbing, tile setting, how to build a shed. We partner with the restoration company, become their preferred supplier for period-appropriate hardware. We lean into the history, into the service. Your name, your reputation, that's our product. He laid the pages on Mr. Solomon's lap. It was a vision. A future. Not a scheme to extract money, but a plan to build value. Mr. Solomon looked at the pages, then at Marcus, his eyes shining with a wet sheen. He reached out his good hand, and Marcus took it. No words were needed. The blueprint was approved. On the drive home, Marcus was quiet. He's going to sign the store over to me, he said finally, staring at the road. A partnership, then full ownership. He said he's been waiting for a worthy successor since his son died in '91. The weight of it, the profound, heartbreaking honor, filled the car. Are you ready? I asked. I have to be, he said. He believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. I won't let that become another debt I can't repay. A month later, on a bright Saturday morning, we opened the store together, Marcus, Mr. Solomon, in a comfortable chair by the register, and me. The first beginner's carpentry workshop was starting at 10. 6 people had signed up, including a young single mother and a retired teacher. At 9:55, as Marcus was setting out coffee and donuts, a familiar black SUV drove slowly past. Tyler was behind the wheel. He didn't stop. He didn't even look. He just drove past, a ghost finally acknowledging he was in a world that no longer had a place for him. He kept his word. We were ghosts to him. Marcus saw him. He paused, a stack of sandpaper in his hands, and watched the SUV disappear. Then he took a deep, clean breath, turned back to his students, and smiled. "All right, folks. Let's talk about measuring twice." That evening, after closing, Marcus came home and handed me a new envelope. Not the ledger envelope. A different one. Heavy, formal. Inside was a notarized document. It was a promissory note from Marcus Cole to Evelyn Cole, for the full amount of the forged bank loan, with a fair interest rate and a 10-year repayment schedule. At the bottom, next to his signature, was a line for mine as the creditor. "The old ledger is closed," he said. "This is a new one. Between us. On my terms, as a man. You'll get your money back, Ma. Every penny." Tears blurred the careful legal print. This wasn't about the money. It was about the restoration of honor. He was rebuilding his credit with me, the only ledger that ever truly mattered. I signed it. Not because I needed the money, but because he needed to give it. Later, I stood at the kitchen window, looking at the shed, now storing gardening tools and bags of soil. The moon shone on its shingled roof. Marcus came to stand beside me. "I was so lost," he said quietly. "I thought the world owed me everything because I had nothing. I was wrong. The world doesn't owe you a thing. But it will give you everything, if you're willing to build it yourself. Nail by nail." I looked at my son. The entitled demand in his eyes was gone, replaced by a quiet certainty. The boy who'd wanted a quick cut of a legacy was now the man shouldering the full, beautiful weight of one. "Your father would be so proud," I whispered. "No," Marcus said, putting an arm around my shoulders. "He'd be proud of you. You didn't just sign a house away, Ma. You signed me over to a better man. You trusted Mr. Solomon to finish the job you started." We stood there in the quiet, in the house that was no longer mine, yet was more my home than ever. He was right. I hadn't lost a deed. I had gained a son. The key Mr. Solomon gave him wasn't just to a store. It was the key to himself. And in handing it over, he had finally, truly, come home.